My name is Nate Morrell. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been at Stockton for 8 years as a prevention specialist and as a prevention specialist and the assistant director of counseling services. So half of my work is working with mental health therapy for things like depression, anxiety disorders, trauma, all the way up to homesickness, transitions, kind of everything there. And then the other half of my work, which is one of my passions, is prevention and outreach. So trying to reach out to people before they're in crisis and trying to provide wellness and health and keep people healthy as opposed to waiting for them to get sick. So this kind of falls into that category. Before Stockton, I worked as community mental health with children and adolescents. I also did in-home work, crisis management, and before that it was hospice, Atlantic Care Hospice for 3 years. So I'm going to try to weave all of those things in and hopefully use all of those to help kind of support you along your path. All right, so let's get going. So why are we here? I've been to so many presentations where at the end, I was just dumbfounded. Like, what were they trying to say? What was the point that was trying to be conveyed? And I'm totally lost. I don't know what happened. You know, what was their intention? So whenever I come up with a new intention or a new presentation, I really try to focus and become crystal clear on my intention. So when we went in spring break last semester, and we switched to kind of working from home for the counseling center, we didn't go anywhere. We kept doing therapy. It just switched to telehealth. And there was an awful lot of people I was working with providing counseling to who were really struggling and who were really suffering. And not just them, but also I'm going through this pandemic myself, and my friends and my family, my acquaintances. There was just so much pain and so much suffering everywhere. I wanted to do something to help. And normally with the prevention work, we would hit the ground running with our therapy dogs and do screenings and have national speakers and walks. However, that wasn't an option now. So I found out that I could use Zoom webinar, which I've never used before. So I was predicting this to be a technical disaster. Hopefully we'll get through it together. But yeah, you know what? Hey, I can do something. I could show up and I can try and I could put something out there in the world, and hopefully it can help somebody who's suffering. And especially now with so many people suffering, I couldn't just not do anything. I have to try to reach out and try to help. So that was the cause behind creating this presentation. It'll be about an hour. Hopefully I'll be done speaking in about 40 to 50 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. All right, so moving on, in my crisis intervention class in grad school, I remember the cover of the textbook. It had the Chinese character for crisis, which was made up of two smaller characters. One is a character of danger, and one's the character for opportunity. I was really struck by this, and I felt that perfectly captures what we're going through now. That right now, there is very clear, very significant danger. There's people who aren't going to make it through this pandemic. You know, there's people who will literally lose their lives. There's relationships that won't make it. There are careers or jobs that won't make it. There's very real danger. Many, many forms of danger. And at the same time, there's also opportunity. There's opportunity for people to simplify, to grow, to identify their values, to come together, to live a life in line with their values, to connect to other people, to purify their lives of a lot of the things that were weighing them down but weren't really serving them. So I think that both of these things are very real and very present. There is a very real danger and there's a very real opportunity. And the intention for this presentation is to help move people from the danger into the opportunity. Like there's a spectrum there, and if I can help support people even partially along that path, then I would consider it to have been a success. All right, so early on in the pandemic, I was feeling kind of down, and a friend sent me this quote from Anne Frank: "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." And, you know, she was in she was in hiding for 2 years. in an overcrowded situation, one of the most horrible situations you can possibly imagine a human being living in. I remember seeing her house in Amsterdam, and next to her bed, they had her mirror, and she had pictures of celebrities that she cut out, like Greta Garbo, and clips from magazines. And it just struck me how real she was in that moment. You know, she was a 13-year-old girl who had everything taken from her. Yet her writing and her story and her heart transcended one of the most horrible atrocities ever imaginable. And she was able to do that with very little. In her words and her work, it echoes through the decades. It's still opening people's hearts now. It's still connecting people. It's still transcending. Also, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, this quote I have hanging up in my office: everything could be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You know, he was, again, subjected to death camps. He lost family members. Everything that could be taken away was taken away. He was able to survive by finding meaning, by finding purpose, by serving people, by finding purpose even within the midst of hell. And after the war, he created logotherapy, which is basically, can we find meaning and purpose? If we have a why, we could survive anyhow. And I think maybe now, with so many of our distractions stripped away, and with us just kind of left with ourselves, is there a possibility that some of the anxiety and some of the depression we're feeling is a lack of meaning, is a lack of purpose, which maybe we didn't see as much because we were so distracted running around with everything else? My intention was not to compare the pandemic to the Holocaust. Clearly, those are vastly different things. But why I bring these two examples of amazing human beings up is because if they were able to transcend hell and to give birth to one of the most beautiful diaries ever written, and to logotherapy in the midst of the Holocaust, what can we do now during this pandemic? If they could do that then, what are we capable of now as human beings? And I would say that we can transcend our suffering as well. And there are role models. There's people who've done it in the most extreme circumstances. So that gives me hope for all of us here and now. All right, privilege. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention privilege. I'm a white male who's lived a very privileged life. I haven't been exposed to some of the pain and suffering that many people have. I am here to learn, and if I commit any microaggressions or inadvertently reinforce structural racism or make an insensitive remark, please let me know. I certainly want to learn and I want to grow. And if you reach out to me, I promise that I will take what you say to my heart and use it to grow. And also, look, not everybody had the luxury of working from home in a safe, comfortable home. There's people who are worried about their citizens' status. There's people who are in violent neighborhoods. There's people who live in traumatic homes where there's abuse and violence and pain. And not everybody has this luxury. So what I would recommend is to just sift through this presentation. If there's pieces of gold that you could pick out and apply to your life, great. Even if you get one or two things, fantastic. Maybe it'll help your life be a little bit more supported and help you feel more loved and thrive a little bit more. I know that everybody's story is not the same, and I'm aware of that, but please just take the best pieces of this and use it, and whatever doesn't serve you, let it go. All right, feeling your feelings. As a hospice social worker, often I would find an adult child of a person who died. They would be running around, they would manage the funeral, they would take care of the family, running and doing, never had a chance to grieve. And then years later, sometimes 10 years later, they're watching a commercial, a dog food commercial, and a person's going off to serve in the military and saying goodbye to their dog. And all of a sudden, this grief that's been there for 10 years, dormant, pours out as fresh as if it had just happened. Another example of this is when college students from horrifically traumatic, violent storylines, lives that seem like movies, surviving foster care and violence and substance use deaths in the family, they make it to Stockton and suddenly things calm down and they're peaceful, and then all of the pain, all of the trauma comes pouring out when it hadn't surfaced for all of these years of surviving. So I think that the lesson there is that this pain that we feel, this emotional pain, psychological pain, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't disappear. It's not something that if we don't deal with, it'll just vanish on its own. It just lays there and waits, and it'll come back out. Sometimes it'll come back out at the most inopportune time. So what I would encourage you to do as you go through this is to feel your feelings. What am I feeling? What do I need? And keep checking in with yourself. Keep looking inwards, because the reality is, if you're able to identify what you're feeling and to feel it and to really feel that wave, you can experience it and it can leave. It doesn't have to get pushed down and stored and come up in some awful way years down the line. You can go through this painful experience that we're all sharing right now, feeling your feelings as they come up. And I would really encourage you to work there. I think that there's a lot of mental health benefit in practicing experiencing your emotions as they arise. All right, so one of the things that I noticed doing counseling through the pandemic was that a lot of what I was seeing wasn't traditional mental health challenges. A lot of times people will describe depression as, hey, everything was going well in my life, but I was still feeling depressed. Everything was good, but I wasn't. I still felt terrible, and with anxiety, anxiety disorders, it's like the response, I have to speak in front of a group, in front of my class, and my heart's racing. I feel like I'm going to pass out. I'm really, really struggling. In the mental health disorders, a lot of times the response doesn't fit the stimulus. And that's not what I was seeing when I was counseling students who are going through adjusting to life in the pandemic. That what I was actually seeing was grief. I was seeing a lot of grief happening. So the first, there was denial about, did we really have to wear a mask? Was this a real thing? Were we going to go home? What was really happening? Certainly a lot of anger about missing graduation and proms and dances and time with friends and trips and, all of the thousands of things that got canceled. There was bargaining as far as trying to figure out, make deals. Oh, if we could only do this or that. And then the rules kept getting more and more strict as people died, more and more often. Depression, these waves of sadness when people were feeling loss, and it was a real loss. And then acceptance. Now, this model, this Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model, apparently there's not a lot of empirical evidence supporting it, but I think it's a good talking point. And I think that these stages aren't sequential. It's not like you master denial and then you go into anger and you master the anger stage and you go into bargaining. It doesn't work like that at all. That these are essentially waves of emotion that are common in the West for people to feel. If you get hit with one of these waves, feel it. Feel the depression. If you're laying at home, you're in bed, you get hit with one of these waves, cry. Allow the emotion to move out. If you're angry, feel angry. You're allowed to feel angry. Don't hurt other people or yourself, but feel the anger. These are very real, and that they're like waves that they pass through. And as you're grieving, in the best case scenario, it takes a long time. And roughly 85% of your energy is going out into grief, into the grief response and the grief journey. So you're left with maybe 15% of your energy to do all of the other things that you have to do in your life. So being patient, being kind, being gentle with yourself, I think is one of the best things that you could do. Now, let's say you've lost somebody from a substance use death or a death from suicide or you lost family members, there was a traumatic divorce, there was trauma in your past, or you were already living, one of the millions and millions of people already living with mental health challenges, and then the pandemic happened, and now you're going through this grief and this loss. Well, the reality is that it's going to be more challenging for you, and you may need professional support. You may need extra support, so that even under the best case scenario, grief and bereavement can take months and months. And now when it's complicated, it could take years. And if you find yourself in that position where things aren't slowly getting better, slowly returning, I would recommend reaching out and getting additional support. All right, physical versus social distancing. When the very first week or two, we were moving our meditation group from being in person to being on Zoom. And we said, all right, well, because of social distancing, and then my friend Mike jumped in and he said, wait, we're physical distancing, we're not social distancing. And I thought that was a really great comment. That stuck with me, because he was exactly correct. Yeah, we need to keep physical distance, but we don't need to keep social distance. In this study, this Harvard study, a longitudinal study, it's really amazing. They studied a group of people from Harvard and then some people from Boston, and every 2 years they would come and they would do surveys. They would also survey the family members and the children. Later on, they do brain scans. It's very in-depth. And this was really the thing that struck me. The clearest message we get from the 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. Social connections are really good for us, and loneliness kills. That went right to my heart when I heard that. And that was from Robert Waldinger, the fourth director of the study. Basically, he was saying that the number one predictor of wellness is social relationships. So holding that in the forefront of your mind, this is a real threat. How easy is it for people to slip through the safety net? Maybe the 50 people they would have seen at work, or they would have come in contact with at Wawa, or they would have come in contact with at the gym or at ShopRite. Now that whole group, how easy is it to slip deeper into loneliness, deeper into depression, when we don't have these same social connections. So what I would recommend is for our brothers and our sisters and our friends and family, we reach out, especially if we haven't heard from somebody, or if we're talking to somebody and they're struggling, or they're posting negative social media things, that we reach out, and we try to prevent people dying from loneliness. I think that this is a crisis, not just of a virus, but of mental health, and of loneliness. And the opposite is true too. I belong to a spiritual group, and one of the members in the group will make tiny loaves of bread, and she'll drop them off on people's apartments or houses or whatever. She'll leave the bread out front, and she'll send you a text, hey, look outside, there's bread there for you. And it's like a little tiny loaf of bread, but it makes you feel like, hey, somebody in the world cares. Somebody's thinking about me. I still feel this connection. I still feel connected to other people and to the earth. So I think if you've noticed in your life that you've let some of these social connections slide, and that you're not where you were before the pandemic, working on them, it's not just going to be good for the people that you connect with, because friendships feel great, but it's also going to be really good for your mental health. The number one predictor of your wellness will be being able to establish and use these connections. So I would really encourage you to follow through with that. The biggest challenge that I've seen working with students so far is so many people's lives are set up through this external structure. Like I would wake up, I have work, so I would take a shower, I get dressed, I stop and get coffee, I come to work a half hour early so I could park. I have this whole routine set up, and it's all based around these external things happening at a certain time. Now, all of a sudden, that tablecloth was just ripped out, and all of the pieces were thrown up in the air. So suddenly we live in a world where you can wear sweatpants for 2 weeks in a row, and you could drink because you don't have to drive anywhere. And, you know, all of these things that you never would have done are so easy to do now, because now the external piece is gone, and it's left entirely up to you whether or not you're going to do the self-care stuff or basic human care stuff. So a lot of people kind of have fallen, not victim, but fallen deeper into challenges, you know, into kind of frustration and clutter and sadness, because they're struggling to come up with internal structure. Now, the good thing is, if you feel better when you shower and you exercise and you're achieving goals and things that you're working on, even if you don't have those things externally anymore, you can use a planner, you can use Google Calendar, you can use a whiteboard, you can, you know, use a million different digital supports now to create your own schedule and to follow through. So many people got lost, and a big part of the work that I'm doing in counseling is just getting people reconnected to some kind of structure. And I think when we lose the structure, sometimes we get lost. And I've just been experiencing a lot of people who are lost. All right, so this is a story from my life, not my proudest moment, but this was something that happened recently. I'm a single father. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and you know, suddenly I was a first grade teacher, and I was also doing full-time counseling work through telehealth, which was a lot. And I love the time with my daughter, and I love all this extra time. But yet it was very stressful. I had done laundry, and I threw the laundry in the bed, and I had my computer on the bed on top of the bamboo stand that I keep the computer on when I work on my bed sometimes. And I read her bedtime story. It was like 9 o'clock. I laid down in bed and just passed out. I was exhausted. I woke up the next morning, and there were clothes everywhere. My laptop was on, and it had a work email on it, which this is like the worst way of coming into the day, you know, and I just felt anxious and frustrated and kind of sad. So I had cleaned everything up in my room. I put the clothes away, I put the computer away, I took a shower, and I noticed my mental health changed. You know, the anxiety dropped, and I felt more at peace. And I wondered, well, is there something to this scientifically? Have people researched this? So I started to look around, and there is some research out there. I thought this study was really interesting because they looked at cortisol levels. So like your stress hormones, like adrenaline and cortisol, they go up when you're anxious. So people's stress hormones are actually increased depending on the clutter, which I think is really impactful when you think about it, that there's a physiological response to clutter. So in this time, if you're spending more time in your room or your apartment or your house, if you can declutter, not only is it going to feel nice to have room to breathe and to simplify and to get rid of some of these things that are maybe taking up space but you're not using, but it will actually have an impact on the way your body functions physiologically and on your mental health. So I would like to encourage everybody, if you have an inclination to simplify and to get rid of some stuff and to declutter, now is the perfect time. Please follow that through, because you're going to see a lot of benefits. All right, so this is something that I came up with after maybe 10,000 hours of counseling. These are just things that I noticed people were lacking, you know, and almost everybody who came in with anxiety or depression was just really struggling. We would look around what was going on in their lives, and we noticed that there's some things missing. So as far as love, you know, if you don't have people or, you know, a career or, you know, a hobby or animal or something in this world that you love, a human life without love can be very empty. And if you don't have that, you don't have to give up, but let's look to try to find ways to fill that, to connect you through love to other people and animals and to the world. Emotional health, we did talk about that already, feeling your feelings. What am I feeling? What do I need? That essentially these emotions don't go anywhere. They just build up. So if we're able to release the emotions as quickly as they come in, we can stay in a homeostasis, in some balance. But if we can't, and right now it could be really challenging to do that, things build and build and build until we explode. So I think looking at your emotional health, feeling your feelings, looking at how you're coping with these emotions, looking at how you're dealing with distress, right now is a really good time to look deeply within that. And emotional health isn't just, again, it's not just great for you, but it's also great for all of the people that you're living with and you come in contact with, because they're also going to benefit from your emotional health. Social health, we talked about that from the Harvard longitudinal study, #1 predictor of wellness. Physical health, that's been challenging. Gyms have closed, exercise groups are closing. It's been really challenging to, if you had a certain routine, you may have had to change that. But again, with living in such a stressful place and with our bodies and with our minds constantly filled up with adrenaline and cortisol and this fight or flight response, unless we can somehow physically release this, and Bessel van der Kolk, the trauma expert, says the body keeps the score, that we store a lot of trauma and emotional challenges in our body. Unless we can physically release a lot of this tension, this buildup of anxiety, it just builds and builds and builds until we get sick, until we break down, until we end up depressed. I think so. Being creative and finding a way to release that. So what I do, I have a group that we exercise together on Zoom. People from all over the world who had different exercise communities and lost those communities, and now we share this. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Service, whenever I'm feeling sorry for myself or whatever I'm caught up in my own problems, what I do is I find somebody who needs help and I help them. And I think that there are a lot of benefits. Obviously, the other person's being helped. That's great. You're not focusing on yourself, which is great. There's mirroring neurons, oxytocin. There's a lot of benefits, physiological benefits from serving and from helping. So I definitely would recommend finding someone who needs help and helping. And look, maybe now I can't go and do the thing. I can't go to, say, the rescue mission and help serve food to people, but maybe I can do crisis text line counseling, where I could stay in my house and I'm still safe and I'm not exposing anybody to any kind of illness, but I can still help out in the ways that I can help out. Environmental health, they studied woods immersion in Japan, which is basically water, sunlight, and trees, and they looked at the effects on mental health, on human beings. And it turns out it has an amazing effect. So I think it's something we probably intuitively knew, but there's research there, which is great. So I love the beach, I love swimming, I love spending time in the ocean. I go at sunrise now when there's no one there, and I get to see this beautiful sunrise the first hour of the day, and I get to swim and I get my beach time in, and then I leave before anybody else is there. And it's kind of like a middle ground. It's maybe not what I would have been doing last summer, but it works for me. There's also some trails that I have access to, and I go at off kind of peak time hours, like early or later, and that connection to the earth, the getting outside of my room, away from the screens, and having kind of a screen detox certainly helps me feel more grounded and connected. So that's something I would definitely encourage. Meaning and purpose, we talked about Viktor Frankl, we talked about logotherapy. If suddenly everything is taken from your life as far as school and work and all these distractions, and you're feeling lost and kind of empty, well, there's a chance that, look, maybe there is a lack of connection to why you're actually here, or a lack of meaning. And that's okay. Then that's when the journey starts of following that and figuring that out. Gratitude, if we have negative thoughts, we can't just say, hey, let me stop having negative thoughts, because that doesn't make you stop having negative thoughts. That's another thought about negative thoughts. So you'll have more negative thoughts. The way we get rid of negative thoughts is we fill our brain with positive thoughts, and that's through the practice of gratitude. Brene Brown talks about her experience with, she's got yoga earrings and yoga jewelry and yoga t-shirts and yoga posters, but she doesn't have a yoga mat. She doesn't practice yoga. So she doesn't get any of the benefits from actually doing yoga. So, it's the same thing with gratitude. It's the practice of gratitude. It's not just having this attitude. You got to actually get out and practice gratitude. We're going to talk about a couple techniques in a few slides, but if you want to get rid of the negative, it's filling your mind with positive. The negative sticks to us like, they say, like Velcro. And that was probably for survival, because if we went through something bad, or someone got hurt or lost, we could play that over and over and over. And then the chances of us repeating that same mistake would be less in the future. But the good things, there's not really like a survival reason for remembering them. So our brains tend to not focus on them unless we retrain our brains to do that. And the good news is you can do that, which is pretty awesome. All right, spirituality, just having a connection to something bigger than yourself. It doesn't have to be organized religion. It could be looking up at the stars. It can be service. It can be swimming in the ocean. It's something that takes you outside of yourself and connects you to something bigger. And finally, mindfulness. Now that's the practice of not being worried about worst case scenario stuff in the future, or depressed about things that happened in the past that you can't change. But as Ram Dass said, being here now, right here in this present moment, alive and aware of what's going on. And it's probably more of a process of returning to the present moment. It's very rare someone able to stay there all the time, but we can train our minds to be more aware, more present, more here. All right. One of the best books I've ever read was Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. She's out of Stanford. She essentially said there's these two types of mindsets. One is a fixed mindset, which people feel like I have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of athletic skill, a certain amount of whatever, and I'm not going to put myself out there, because if I do and I fail, then I'm a failure. And then there's another group she studied, which people who have a growth mindset. So Michael Jordan would watch his mistakes at the end of every basketball game to see, what happened. And he would look non-judgmentally and watch his mistakes, not to beat himself up, but to grow and to learn from what went wrong. And then he got really fantastic coaching, and he kept growing and growing and growing. So if we can learn to look at our mistakes and our failures as growth opportunities, and look at them non-judgmentally and get coaching along the way, that's the path to really transcending this fixed mindset and never stepping out of our comfort zones, and ultimately never growing. All right, so positive psychology. This is from a book from Marty Seligman called Flourish. Basically, since Freud, it was always, hey, let's focus on neurosis and depression and anxiety, psychosis. But nobody really talked about happiness, and how can you grow happiness, and how can you grow wellness? And when Marty Seligman brought that up, he was kind of laughed at. The people thought it was ridiculous. But what he found out is actually you can. So increasing your positive emotion, engagement, being in the flow, doing something that you love so much that you lose track of time. They call that, the flow. Relationships, we talked about the Harvard study already. Meaning and purpose, logotherapy, we talked about that. And accomplishing things, getting things done. That through focusing on these areas, it's possible to grow wellness. It's possible to grow happiness. We don't have to just wait around to get depressed and anxious, or treat someone's depression and anxiety, and they're like, well, okay, I'm not actively anxious or depressed, but I'm not happy. And then as therapists saying, well, that's as good as it gets. Get out of here. No, it's like that's just the starting point, is getting you back to, all right, I'm not anxious or depressed, but the real goal is to thrive and to flourish. So two of the exercises that I've practiced and that really made a positive impact on my life, and that you can do right now, whether or not you're completely quarantined or not, the 3 good things exercise. So write 3 good things from each day. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be that you got a parking spot, or you had an avocado for lunch, or you walked by a stranger and you both smiled at each other and had a nice moment, or you didn't have back pain today, or your eyes worked, or I don't know, anything. It can be really anything, but try to pick different things each day, and then try to write why you think these things happen. As you do this, unconsciously, your brain is going to know that, all right, I have this homework assignment every night, and your brain is going to start to become more aware of things to be grateful for. And while your brain is becoming more aware of things to be grateful for, you're going to be becoming less aware of things to be miserable about, which is what we do based on survival, but is terrible for our mental health. It takes about 5 minutes Also, if you have children, one of the things that you could do, and this was also a fun thing for me, I would write one moment a day down, also in my journal next to 3 good things. That was like a really precious moment for me, or a really nice moment that I would have forgot in a week or in a day. But now I have these journals filled with these good things. And when I'm feeling down and when I'm feeling isolated or disconnected or lost or sad, I can flip through these gratitude pages and these precious parenting moment pages, and my heart's just filled with love and happiness. So it's a little bit of work, but I think it's worth it. There's no side effects. You can't overdose on it. There's really no danger to it, other than just investing some time. Letters of gratitude. I absolutely love this. I tend to do this around the holidays. I find somebody who's impacted my life, whether it's like a friend, a professor, a teacher, anybody really, anyone who's impacted my life. I try to sit down and explain to them how they've helped me and what impact this has on me, and express my gratitude. And think of how wonderful that would feel to receive a letter like that. I think it'd be amazing, but I also think it's amazing to write it, because to get to that place where you're expressing gratitude, you have to feel it. And it's also fantastic for your mental health too. So I think those 2 exercises you can do now completely quarantine, and you can really have a major impact on your mental health, and also lift other people up while you do it. One of the things that came up through therapy is that it turned out that most of us have a list of things that what we dream about doing if the world ever shut down. So learning to speak French, getting in shape, learning to meditate, learning to play guitar, reading a classic novel. Most people that I was talking to had this list, and all right, someday I'm going to do this if everything else shuts off. It never shut off until it did. So a lot of the work was, all right, what's your list? What are the things that you always wanted to do but didn't have time to because you were running and you were doing so much? If there was ever a time to do them, now is that time for so many people. If we're ever gonna do these things, now it really is that time. So sit down, write your list out. What are these things? Maybe I can come out of this on the other side of the coronavirus. I speak French, or I play guitar, or I can do yoga, or I can do 50 sit-ups. I don't know. Whatever your thing is, look at it. And not only can you just survive this coronavirus, this pandemic, and all of the challenges that are going on in life now, but you can actually come out of it ahead. You can come out of it more healthy, more resilient, with almost like post-traumatic growth. So I would encourage you to write your list down and look at ways that you can start to work on that stuff. And it feels good. It feels really good to work on your list. All right. This was from my boss, and he said, all right, yeah, that's all true. All those negative things are true, but what's good? And it was stressful teaching my daughter and doing full-time counseling through telehealth and trying to do all the other stuff that needed to get done. But I got to see her grow, and I got to spend countless hours with her, which I wouldn't have had. I got to see her brain develop. I got to see how she learns best. I got to simplify my house and clean out 20 years of papers and get rid of, donate clothes. And that there was ultimately, I felt in my life, a purification process where a lot of these external things were taken away. So I was given the luxury of purifying myself, and not just clearing out the stuff in my house, but the internal stuff that was keeping me from thriving, the unhealthy relationships and the unhealthy situations that I was mindlessly engaging in. Suddenly I had some space and I can look at those things. And if I just focus on the negative, I'm going to miss the good parts. And there often is light within the darkest times, that there almost always is something there. And if you can identify and focus on that, that can counter out some of the negativity. Coping skills, this is something that comes up often in therapy. What I basically do is I assume people are human beings and that they are coping with life the best they can. They're using the skills they have to get through life. Now, some of those skills I think arguably are healthier than others, and some of them are less healthy. Now, some people use things like non-suicidal self-injury. Some people use things like binge drinking, binge eating, excessive video game use, pornography. I mean, there's a lot of things people will use to either release emotion or to numb out. But essentially, they're all coping skills. So in therapy, what I do is I look at them completely non-judgmentally. All right, look, here's what you're doing to survive. This is how this is working. Maybe you're sacrificing a part of your body to save your whole body. Maybe the self-harm is keeping you from dying from suicide. Okay, it's successful, but do we want to keep this coping skill, or do we want to switch to one that has less pain and less shame attached to it? So just kind of stepping back, looking non-judgmentally at how we're coping and seeing if these ways serve us, or if we want to transition into other ways and experiment with them until we find the ones that are going to really work for us. So I think I would encourage you to kind of focus in on that path. Now, if my standard was to come home from work and to have a glass of wine, but now I'm not leaving to work and I'm staying here and life is more stressful, that one glass can turn to 2 or 3 or 4. And yes, maybe that's successful. That helps me numb out. It helps me relax. But then the next day I'm feeling tired and irritable, and I'm hard to deal with, and I'm angry and I'm grumpy. All right, yeah, so that was successful. But now maybe if I come home from work and I journal, and I meditate, or I walk in the woods, or I exercise, or whatever these other things are, if I can find these things, I can release that same emotion that's building up, and I don't have to feel hungover the next day, or I don't have physical scars. So really look at your coping skills honestly and openly and see if you need to update them. Sometimes we just do stuff that we did as teenagers just because that's what we've always done. But maybe now with this pandemic, this is a chance for us to really look inward and see what's serving us and what's not serving us. So I was at a virtual conference recently, and they said, hey, this is a historic time. Everyone should be journaling. Historically, people are going to be interested in what you're experiencing, your grandchildren or generations in 100 years. What was life like for people? So journal. Capture your experiences. This is a very important time in history. And additionally, there's also the benefits of, again, the stress comes in. If we can release it as quickly as it comes in, we can stay in balance. If we can't, the stress builds up until we break down in some way, whether physically or mentally or emotionally or psychologically. So that there's 2 benefits. So right now, if you're not journaling, not everyone who comes in to counseling journals who gets better, but a lot of people do. It's a really common thing for the people who make drastic improvements and stay healthy, not just get healthy, but also stay healthy. I have a 7-year-old, and I said, all right, honey, look, you should start to journal, because if you do, your grandkids or future generations will want to see what life was like for a 7-year-old going through the pandemic. And she rolled her eyes at me and said, no, I don't want to do that. I think she was trying to get me she thought I was trying to trick her into doing more schoolwork. So I said, look, honey, let's do it together. We'll both journal, and we'll sit down together at the end of the night, and we'll capture what life's like for us. And that was more successful. So I think maybe if you're listening to this today, or you're watching this because you want to help somebody that you love who's struggling, what I would say is to not come to them with 10 things they should do, but instead come to them, like say I'm dating someone, like, you need to go to the gym, right? that might not go over so well with me, but if they say to me, hey, I want to get healthy, I'm looking on getting healthy, and I want to feel good, and I want to increase my mental health, my physical health. Will you come with me, be my support, and work out with me? I'm way more likely to say yes to that and to join them in the gym than I am the other situation where they just tell me I need to start working out. Like, you're a mess, you should work out, right? Nobody wants to hear that part. So if you want to help somebody and you want to use any of the stuff that we've talked about today, do it with them, model the behavior. And if they don't want to do it, it doesn't have to stop you from working on your wellness and your self-care and your resilience, that you ultimately have that freedom, no matter how negative the external situation is. And we're coming to an end here. I believe this is the last slide. This guy, Russ Harris, writes a lot of great books on acceptance and commitment therapy. They're very approachable. They're very easily accessible. They're not written, I don't believe, for therapists. I think they're written for all of us, for everybody. This is such a beautiful quote. Values are your heart's deepest desires for how you want to behave, how you want to treat yourself, others, and the world around you. That so much of this emotional pain we may be going through is that we're not in touch with our deepest desires, with our true values. Not only we're not in touch with them, but we're also not living in line with them. So taking some of this time to do some excavation, internal excavation, and identifying what is your heart's deepest desire, and then getting your life set up so you can start to move on a path like that is going to be tremendously beneficial for your mental health and for the world. We're all going to benefit from you doing that. In acceptance and commitment therapy, they have this example of a needle point, where on the outside of the needle point, it might this beautiful picture of a tree or God bless this home or something like that. And then you turn the needle point around and there's strings hanging out everywhere. It's a total mess. And that's kind of the condition of being a human being. We have this outside part, which is relatively well together. And then inside, everybody's kind of a mess with our thoughts, our beliefs, our self-hatred, our struggles, our negativity, all of these things that we carry along with us as human beings. But yet, even with being perfectly imperfect, with being a mess, we're still able to identify our values and move along towards them. We can still do that even in the context of a pandemic, even in the context of trauma and pain, even in a context of suffering everywhere. It's possible to do this work. And I would encourage you to do the work. What's more important than this? If we can heal ourselves, we heal everybody who comes in contact with us, which is so beautiful. I would like to thank Margot for getting this presentation together. She did the PowerPoint. I think it's stunning. I absolutely love it. She's been amazing. I wanted to thank Pete from IT, Pete Gallagher. He's been patient with me and talked me through Zoom webinar. Also Shannon and the whole production team, they've also helped me, and as well as our counseling team and the students I was counseling, still am, and my boss who gave me time to work on this project. It's really been a labor of love, and I hope that some pieces of this can reach someone and can help on some level. I think it's helped me for having to gather all this stuff and to present it. So hopefully it's helpful to you in some way. All right, so we are all done. Let's see if there's any questions. Let's see how we're doing on time, actually. Oh, good. All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. All right. All right, so thank you, Cheryl, for your kind words. There was a question about how young children can cope with the family situation when they're quarantined. I think it really depends on the child. Some children are really easy adapters and weren't big fans of school and weren't big fans of going out, who their favorite thing to do is to hang out in the house with their family and not have to do things. And school is very stressful for a lot of kids. But then the opposite is true. Some kids are very extroverted and they fill their lives up with connecting through other people, to other people. So I don't know, it kind of depends. One thing that I would say, if I had young children, I know personally I'm way more patient, way more kind, way more loving when I'm, as a parent, when I'm caring for myself. If I got up, say my daughter wakes up at 8:30, if I can wake up at 6 and I can read for a half hour, then I can do heartfulness meditation, and then I can do my Zoom yoga class from India, which is ridiculous, but it's my life now. And then by the time she wakes up, I've already spent an hour and a half purifying myself and releasing all of this emotional pain and stuff that I've picked up from watching the news and talking to people and going on social media, so that the me that she gets is decluttered, that a lot of the dirt that's gathered around my heart, I've already cleaned that. I'm already purifying that, so that when she sees me, it's the best version of me. I'm the most kind, I'm the most patient when I'm caring for myself the best. So if I want to care for the young children, I would care for myself, and then they would benefit from that. I think what else? Kids need two things. They need love and they need structure. And a lot of times when I was working with children and adolescents, doing therapy, it was almost always too much of one and none of the other. Like these disciplinarian parents who never gave their kids any love, and these kids would be acting out and just dying for love. Or the other way, these parents that are very loving but gave their kids no rules and just let them run completely wild and run the house and be the parents of the house. Either way is kind of not good. I haven't seen either of those extremes turn out well. So I think, again, we talked about external versus internal structure. Well, kids can't really do the internal structure, but we can create structure for them in their house. We could still give them a routine. We could still make their lives feel safe and predictable. Maybe on our 80-inch TVs, we don't have the news on all day talking about how the world's coming to an end. And we model for them self-care, and we listen to them. We play games with them. There's tons of great exercises with young kids now too. There's yoga for kids, and there's breathing exercises, and there's meditation and mind jars and activities. So now is actually a really good time. There's tons of great information out there. If you have any more questions, working with kids and supporting young kids through this, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my email here in case you don't have it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. All right, let's see. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. I really want to thank you because this allowed me to engage in this process. And what I thought would be helpful for other people, I really had to look inward and see what was helping me and what was hurting me. So this allowed me to grow a lot. So thank you. Thank you for everybody who helped make this a reality. And hopefully this will be up on Stockton's YouTube page within a couple weeks and can live on and help other people in the future. All right, thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Take care. Oh, sorry, Cheryl. I just saw your questions. We actually do have a few more minutes. Again, I'm learning Zoom webinar. Okay. How can one cope with frustration of when people don't believe the science and follow guidelines, and when we do, but their actions negatively impact us? Wow. That's a great question. So you're there, you're doing your best, you're wearing your mask, you're keeping your physical distance, and other people are just ignoring it. How does one cope with the frustration? I think, first of all, the thing that you're doing right is you're recognizing that you're frustrated. So, okay, I'm frustrated. Now, what do I do because it's not a problem to that person. I'm on the Ocean City Boardwalk and there's 10 people walking by without masks, coughing and sneezing everywhere. It's not a problem for them. It's a problem for me, right? Because now I'm really frustrated, and I'm driving home and I'm still frustrated, and I'm petting my dog and I'm still frustrated, and I've carried that impression with me throughout the day. So, I think we cope with that frustration just like we do every other frustration. What are your coping skills? It could be numbing out. We talked about people drinking more and playing excessive video games and social media and all those things. Or maybe I go home and I do a workout video on YouTube, or I journal about my frustrations and I let it pour out of my heart, or I punch the punching bag in my basement, or I write I draw a picture of all the people walking around without masks on an egg, and I smash the egg against a tree, you know, like, but that ultimately, look, it's a problem for me. It's not a problem for them. So just like any frustration, I have to release that. And if I don't release it, it doesn't hurt the people who aren't taking care of other people who, or don't seem to care about keeping, you know, their brothers and sisters safe. It becomes my problem. So then I have to release that. So, you know, for me, I like meditation. I like running. I like talking to friends. I like journaling. Those are things that I do. And if you try those things and then none of them work, there's a million other things that you could do. But recognize that you are frustrated and take an action first, because if you don't, then it ends up an argument with our partners, or yelling at the dog who didn't deserve to be yelled at, or whatever. So I think that's it. Recognize it. What am I feeling? And then what do I need? I'm frustrated. I need time in nature. I'm frustrated. I need to stretch. I'm frustrated. I need to journal. I'm frustrated. I need to just lay down and close my eyes. You know, like, I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure if it is or not, but if it's not, let me know. We can talk more about it. What strategy for self-talk when the fear of stepping out of the house grows into anxiety and panic? Yeah, well, that's a good one too. You know, I think when we talked about acceptance and commitment therapy, as far as like, all right, what's my values? What are the things that are most valuable to me? And now let's say for me, I was always struck by the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote of life's most important question is, what are you doing for other people? And I feel panicky sometimes leaving the house and going into situations where there's other people. And, but if I'm going there to help somebody, all right, I could be a panicky helper. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing that says that I can't have anxious thoughts and still move forward and do something to help the world. But again, let's say I was going out and I hadn't been out. I'm like reintroducing myself into the world, which I am in some ways, right? This is my first, you know, time at, let's say, volunteering somewhere. I'm probably not going to just wake up that day, drink a bunch of coffee, watch the news on my giant TV, get completely panicky, and then try to push myself into that situation. I might wake up that day early, have a healthy breakfast. I might meditate. I may call a friend, an old friend, and talk about what's going on with me and how I'm struggling. I might journal. I might, you know, play with the dog for a while. I might bring the dog with me if I have a therapy dog, and still push forward, because, you know, I don't get this one life, and I want to live in line with my values. And if service is a value, I'm not going to allow anxious thoughts to stop me from living a life that's in line with my values. Now, if anxiety gets intense enough, you may need professional support for that. And that's fine. You know, just like if your pancreas wasn't working, or your kidneys, or your heart, you know, you would get support for that. And I think it's the same thing. If we were already sensitive, if we already had higher levels of anxiety, and then we get hit with a pandemic, and then all of the other unrest in society, yes, that could definitely push any of us over the edge. So, you know, the cure for anxiety is exposure, but you don't want to push somebody too hard into that, because you can end up hurting somebody. So, you know, there's no one right answer to that. I think we have to take it on a case by case. If you can gently expose yourself to the anxiety while doing a lot of self-care, the second or third or fourth time you're going to be in that situation, they're going to be less stressful. If you can't do it, which you may not be able to do it, then I would reach out for additional support, for professional support. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. So thank you for the great questions. I loved it. I love people asking questions, and that's our time. So take care, everybody. Be well. I'm grateful for sharing this hour with you, and I hope I get to see you again soon sometime.